We have a full agenda today, so we hope that everyone can participate. This is a meeting format instead of a webinar, so we do want everyone to participate. There will be a Q&A session towards the end of the meeting. But if you have questions or thoughts during the presentation, we definitely encourage you to use the chat feature to type out your questions or your comments. When we get to the Q&A feature, you'll be able to raise your hand and unmute yourself to ask your questions, because we do want it to be interactive, so you can speak to the presenters directly. So we will go ahead and get started. We want to first thank our anchor sponsors for MAX. You will see them listed there. We appreciate their support of MAX and MAX Minutes, and thank them for their support going forward. Our agenda today, I'm here to do welcome and introductions. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Dana Inman. I'm the President and CEO of Atlanta Center for Self-Sufficiency, and I also chair the MAX Provider Council. Today, we're going to spend some time focusing on the draft of the Regional Workforce Plan and getting your input and feedback on the plan. We have some great presenters today. You'll see them listed: Sonya Grant, Director of WorkSource Cobb; Rob Davis, Deputy Director of WorkSource DeKalb; Rob LeBeau, Director of WorkSource Atlanta Regional; and Brett Lacy, Director of WorkSource Fulton. After they present, we will have a Q&A session, so again, please get those comments and questions ready, and we look forward to your participation. We're going to start with a quick poll just to see who's in the room, and then I'm going to turn it over to Sonya to start us off. So if you don't mind kind of telling us what agency, type of organization you represent, so we can get a sense of who's in the room. We're at 50% voted, so we're almost there. Like we have good representation from local workforce boards, the chamber, education training providers, some social service providers. All right. Thank you all for participating in the poll. So we're going to go ahead and get started and turn it over to Sonya.
Good morning. Thank you so much, Dana. I appreciate it. My name is Sonya Grant, and I'm the Director of WorkSource Cobb. It's truly a pleasure to be here today. So before we get started and take a deep dive into the regional plan, I want to provide everyone on the call a quick overview of the workforce system. We weren't exactly or completely sure about who would be on the call this morning and the breadth and the depth of information or understanding that you guys may have about workforce. So we wanted to provide you with this overview to provide you with greater understanding about the regional plan. So I'm going to work on trying to share my screen. So excuse me for a second. I'm not completely great at this, but I'm going to do my best at sharing this screen. Let's see here. Turn on the slideshow. Excuse me. I apologize. Can you guys see my slideshow, Dana? I think you need to stop sharing your screen.
We can see your screen.
We can see it.
Just want to go to presentation view.
There you go.
There we go. I apologize for the wait. So let's get started this morning. Thank you again for your patience with me on this. So Georgia is comprised of 19 workforce development agencies in the state, and each of these agencies provide employment and training and education and resources to both individuals and employers throughout the state. We're all funded by the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act, and that's actually the funding source for our national workforce development system. The regional plan that we're going to talk about today encompasses 5 local workforce development boards. And that includes the city of Atlanta, Cobb, DeKalb, Fulton, as well as ARC. And each of these agencies operates one or more of comprehensive service centers throughout their local areas. Now, Georgia workforce agencies all operate under the Georgia of a unified state brand, and that's called WorkSource Georgia. And this allows each of those areas to leverage the collective strength of the workforce system, as well as enhances our ability to expand awareness of the resources and services of the workforce system within our local areas under this brand. Each of the local workforce agencies operates a local board, and board membership is actually guided by WIOA. And the membership is made up of approximately 51% employers, with another 20% coming from organized labor. Other mandated membership includes mandated partners under WIOA, such as Adult Ed, Voc Rehab, Veterans, Community and Economic Development. As I mentioned earlier, we're all funded under WIOA, and WIOA really gives each of the local workforce areas, as well as the state, an extraordinary opportunity to improve the quality of life for the people in their local areas and throughout the state. We utilize an integrated service delivery model, and that model is actually directly linked to employers. We operate technically under the 3 pillars of the workforce system, and this system specifically calls for the use of sector strategies and career pathways. And these are really key strategies for all of us to be able to meet the needs of both employers, workers, as well as job seekers. WIOA is designed for us to strengthen and improve our nation's workforce systems and really help our Americans and our people in our local areas basically to get back to work. It supports youth and adults, and we prioritize individuals that have barriers to employment, elevating them to higher paying jobs and high demand industries. WIOA also views employers technically as our equal customers, because we want to be able to ensure that those employers are able to obtain and retain a skilled and talented workforce. As I mentioned earlier, each of the agencies operates one or more service centers in their local areas, and they provide a full range of services all under one roof. That includes services like resume writing, interview skills, labor market information, as well as funding for individuals to obtain education and training in high demand industries. We also provide supportive services, believe it or not, to ensure that those individuals are able to not only obtain training and employment, but the most important thing is that they're able to retain training and employment. So we want to ensure that they're receiving those services as well. We talked about employers a moment ago, and again, those employers are viewed as our equal customers, and therefore we provide very robust services to our employers. This includes funding incumbent worker training, funding on-the-job training. So if employers have new hires that they're making, as long as those new hires are eligible, we'll provide between 50 and 75% wage reimbursement for those new hires. We provide space for job fairs and access to a skilled and talented pipeline of workers for those employers. Now, what I've laid out thus far is really just a snapshot of our workforce system and the services that are being provided under that system. And while each local area concentrates its resources on support for employers and individuals in their own local areas, we recognize that our collective impact really allows us to better leverage our resources and develop braided funding strategies to address challenges across the region. It also allows us to make greater use of the workforce ecosystem. So the regional plan is going to give you much more insight into those strategies and our goals and the partnerships that we have around the table to meet the growing demands of industry and employers in our local areas. So what I want to do at this point, I'm going to hand it off to Rob Davis, and he's the Deputy Director of DeKalb, and he'll move us right into the local plan. So Rob.
Thank you, Sonya. And I'm Rob Davis, Deputy Director of WorkSource DeKalb. And what I'm going to talk about is the local and regional workforce development plan itself. But before we get there, I just want to we'll go back to what Sonya just discussed. She gave an overview of what WorkSources do. In essence, what we do is we provide workforce development. I'm sorry, let me back up. We provide workforce development needs, training opportunities for the Metro Atlanta area, the residents, and the business community. So we're going to start. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. This, I need to move this one off. This will stop other screen, yes. So what I'm gonna talk about is the actual development of the plan. Next slide. Right now, in our area, in our region, we encompass 10 counties and 5 local workforce areas. As we were talking about, we have Fulton, Atlanta, ARC, of course, WorkSource DeKalb, and Cobb. We ran a plan in areas so we could be prepared to meet the state and federal requirements. ARC hired Accenture, and Accenture, we really appreciate what they did for us because they did pro bono services to assist us in creating a plan. We conducted 23 stakeholder interviews and surveyed over 230 WorkSource customers. Also, we as WorkSource directors, we met on 3 virtual workshops that were led by Accenture to help us to make sure that we got this plan in order. One thing when in this COVID environment, we had complications, but we worked our way through it with automation and teamwork. Next slide. So Sonya talked about WIO. WIO is the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act. And this is the federal government mandate guidance that what we have to do. So each local area has to create a plan, such in this case, WorkSource DeKalb. We had to create a plan. But when you're in an area that has, in this case, Atlanta Regional area, which the other, what I just discussed, we have 5 work sources. We found that it's very important that you sit there and you plan regionally. You don't want to plan just locally, in this case, planning just for DeKalb. We want to plan for the Atlanta regional area because we're creating a workforce regionally. Next slide. So what are some of the components of the plan? We had to sit down and discuss the strategic elements, guidance, structure, things of that nature. We had to come up with we had to come up with a regional plan. We had to start out with our local boards, our local plans. We had to integrate it. We had to talk about performance, what our performance expectations are. Talk about the training providers, use of technology, state initiatives. We had to talk about our vision. Also in the plan, we have attachments. So how did we make this happen? What were our next steps? So we're mandated 30 days out to put it out there to the public for review. So in our case, WorkSource DeKalb, we have it on our website. The other agencies may have it out on their website, on the county's websites, things of that nature. It's open for 30-day public comment period. Submit a draft to the plan to our governors, which is the governor, which is TCSG, is the Office of Workforce Development, that filters that information up to the governor. Then we take account those public comments to come up with the state findings, and then we incorporate it in our local plans and our regional plan. So I've briefly gone over the intent. Let me get out of this one. Excuse me. Of the plan. And I'm gonna unshare the screen now. So I've briefly gone over what the intent of the local and regional workforce development plans. And now I'm going to turn it over to Rob LeBeau from the WorkSource Metro Atlanta Regional Plan. He's going to break that down. You got it, Rob.
All right. Well, good morning, everybody. Thanks again for being here. Thank you, Rob, for walking us through how the plan was developed and what the basic structure of that plan is. I will mention, when we talk about the structure of the plan, so the guidance that we get from the federal government and from the state TCSG Office of Workforce Development has a very detailed outline of what the plan must contain and the way that the information is presented. So there's not a lot of flexibility on things that we can add additional information in there, but it has to be in this format and include a lot of specific information. And if you look at the first third of the plan, it really focuses on data. And hopefully everybody is seeing my screen. If you're not, let me know and I can, there we go. it really focuses on data. And it starts by looking at what are the key industries, or what we call the targeted industries, in-demand industries within the region. And so we used information from Burning Glass, as well as from Jobs EQ primarily, to pull the data and determine what were the industries that had a good share of the jobs, that had a projection to continue to grow in the future, and that were paying a living wage. And so when we started looking at those, and you can see the top occupations on the right-hand side, this is just one of about 50 different tables and charts that are in the first part of this plan. You can see through 2019, through December of 2019, the top occupations that were being advertised and that we were able to pull from Burning Glass Technologies. And not surprisingly, IT, healthcare, truck drivers, transportation, distribution, logistics. Also, we have advanced manufacturing and skilled trades. Those are what ended up being the 5 in-demand industries. The ones we still see a lot of jobs related to retail sales or customer service, and those do not rise to the level of an in-demand industry because they did not meet the thresholds of those key pillars that we're looking for. For example, retail, there's a tremendous number of retail positions within the Atlanta region, but they typically don't pay enough as in a living wage and offer a career ladder to move up and advance. So that's why something like that did not become one of the in-demand industries. So when we talk about data, and I'm not going to go through these in a lot of detail, what I want to do is highlight a couple of charts that show the type of information that is in here. And I would encourage you to go in and look at the plan. And if you're looking for data for work that you're doing, this is really a fantastic resource. And there's some overview data about the 5 industries in general, but then it gets into a lot of specific information about each of the 5 targeted industries. So again, if you're interested in that information, look at it in the regional plan, and then you can also go to the local plans, which have similar data, but they drill down into just to that local area. So there'd be more information about just the 5 industries in DeKalb, or in Cobb, or in Fulton. So a couple of the other really interesting information is when you look at what were the top certifications in 2019, you can see that these were what was listed in a job posting. What are people looking for? Again, things related to being able to drive, or healthcare, and security, and other things you see listed on there. Interesting information about demographics. You can see those other 2 charts that are on there. Now, the one that I found interesting is when you look at gender by industry. And it's not surprising when you think about it, but I think there's opportunities when you look at it. For example, healthcare and social assistance, 82% of the people that work in healthcare are female. And so there's a real opportunity to expand that. Why aren't we putting more males into the healthcare and social assistance industry? There are certainly things that we can do to work on that. And then if you look at the other way, construction is a flip the other way. Almost 90% of construction are males and only 10% are females. So there's some things that we can do to expand potential support to those industries by offering more people going into those areas. Another discussion that you'll see in the plan is related to opportunity jobs. And this is something, again, we need to thank Accenture directly on this, because they did a lot of work of bringing in additional data related to opportunity jobs. And the way that was defined in the plan are jobs that have a lower potential to be impacted by automation. They pay a living wage, and they're projected to grow. And there's numerous pages in the plan and in the appendix of the plan that talk about these opportunity jobs. So I would encourage you to explore that a little bit more when you get a chance to look at the plan. Now, moving away from the hard data, as Rob mentioned, the process of developing the plan included interviews with our customers, so people who have actually participated in the workforce services. We also had some stakeholder facilitated sessions And this included both staff of the workforce boards, as well as some of our board members and some of our key partners. And based on that information, there were some themes that were emerging that that were identified as priorities to be addressed within the regional plan. And one of the things we did during those stakeholder discussions was to do some analysis about what were the perceived benefits of addressing some of those themes, which is the bottom axis down here. So those that moved to the right, it was perceived that they would have a higher benefit if we were able to address those in the plan. And then on the left axis, you see is the perceived effort it would take to address those areas. So the more you go to the top of this chart is the more effort it will take to address those. So if we can focus more as a region on customer service, how do we address the needs of our customers, the businesses and the job seekers? We think that there'll be a high benefit through that. And that is a mid to lower mid effort of dealing with customer service. On the other hand, funding, if we can work on funding, it would have a very good benefit to the region and the workforce boards, but finding additional funding will take a lot of effort. And it's not a but, it's an and it will take a lot of effort. So we are going to look at funding opportunities, but we know that's going to take a lot more work. And then at the bottom, you see is dealing with the WorkSource boards. Each of the 5 workforce areas are managed and overseen by a board. And this is what Sonya talked about at the very beginning, the composition of those boards. This is not to say that we shouldn't work on our boards, but what we saw as a regional effort, there is less benefit and it would take less effort to work on our WorkSource boards, primarily because there isn't a regional WorkSource board. Those are individual boards. And so that priority should be in a local workforce plan as opposed to the regional workforce plan. So after all the work that was done through the data collection, through the interviews, through the facilitated sessions, we ended up with a series of, you can see on here, of 6 goals that were identified in the plan. And that you'll see as we talk to the next step, which is what Brett's going to take over, also help inform what the actions will be as we move forward. So first and foremost, we want to support regional innovation and integration of activities throughout the region, both at the local level and at the regional level. So how do we, as a regional effort, support innovation and related activities? That is our first goal. The second is to make sure that we have meaningful and targeted relationships with key partners. And this is significant because we know that workforce development is not done in a vacuum. It is not just up to the local workforce boards to advance workforce development in the region. It really takes a full network of providers and businesses and nonprofits and government to advance workforce development. So making sure that we have meaningful and targeted relationships with key partners is another of the goals here. Third is making sure that we have collaboration among the local workforce development boards so that we're exchanging best practices and sharing our information and improving efficiency and standardization. So one of the benefits of being in Metro Atlanta is that we have 5 workforce boards and we have different focus areas or different commitments to move forward and advance workforce development. One of the downsides of being in Metro Atlanta is we have 5 workforce boards and it gets very confusing to our customers about which workforce board they should work with. They're not really as concerned or understand that if you cross the line between City of Atlanta and Fulton County that you're going into a different workforce board. So ensuring that we have collaboration among those 5 workforce boards is key. Of course, looking at our customers, we want to ensure that our job seekers have access to quality career services, either online, which is a newer focus because of COVID, but it will be retained when we come out of COVID, and in person. So making sure that we are addressing the needs of our job seekers. And getting to our second core customer is ensuring that we coordinate with employer engagement and business services across the region, making sure that we are fostering those strong relationships with our employers and that they have seamless resources among the 5 workforce boards. And finally, and this really does underscore all of the work that we're doing within the plan and in the local plans, is looking to ensure that we are improving economic mobility in the region by collaborating with regional workforce development, economic development, and others to reduce the racial, socioeconomic, and other inequities in the workforce system and the workforce outcomes. So how are we ensuring that those people that have more barriers and those that may not have had access to services throughout the history and that have other issues, that we are making sure that they are having economic mobility. And when we talk about economic mobility, what we see in Metro Atlanta, unfortunately on this one, we do not want to be at the top of the list, but we are, is that if you look at the major metros throughout the country, the Metro Atlanta area is either very last or second to last in economic mobility, which means somebody who is born into the lower quintile of family income has very little opportunity to raise to a higher level of family income. So across the major metros in Atlanta or in the country, we are at the bottom of that list, and we need to make every effort we can to improve economic mobility so that we're offering those benefits to all of our residents in Metro Atlanta. I mentioned collaboration, and the regional workforce plan obviously is not being implemented in a vacuum, and there are many other efforts going on across the region. One of those key efforts, and one of those efforts that many of you are probably involved in, is the Regional Workforce Initiative. And this kicked off back in March of this year when we were at the Center for Civil Rights. Hopefully many of you were there. And then of course COVID hit. And so we did not continue to work in person on this, but the work for the Regional Workforce Initiative did continue. We worked with stakeholders, we worked with some other interest groups to advance the goals of this effort and to start creating action strategies to move forward. So if you look at the title up here, one of the exciting things is we now have a new name for this effort, and something that you're going to start seeing coming out in a more branded fashion is, instead of calling it Regional Workforce Initiative, we are calling this effort Equity at Work. And of course that has multiple meanings, but that is what we're going to move forward with, is Equity at Work. And you can see the 5 primary goals of this initiative is also a common theme that you'll see in the Regional Workforce Plan. So making sure that we're developing policy and practice solutions that advance racial equity outcomes. We're developing regional outcome metrics so that we can track this. Increasing the availability, access, and scalability of quality training programs that lead to sustainable living wages. Developing strategies and resources to increase the number of secondary students transitioning to sustainable living wages. So not just ensuring that they get to college or going to universities, but those that want to transition into living wage directly out of high school. And then increasing coordination across the workforce entities to strengthen engagement and responsiveness to the employer needs. So that is a correlated effort that's going on within the region. And then the third component I want to mention is a plan that many of you may not have heard of, but hopefully a lot of you have. It's called Catalyst. And this is a plan that was developed by the Atlanta Regional Commission in our role as the Economic Development District for Metro Atlanta. And previously this was called the Regional Competitiveness Strategy. In 2017, this plan was updated and is called Catalyst. The importance of this plan is when we have this plan updated and approved by the federal government, that means our local governments are eligible for additional funding from the Economic Development Administration. This plan has 4 goals, and if you look in the middle of it, it is all based around the core goal of upward economic mobility. Again, a common theme in all 3 of these efforts that I've mentioned. And you can see the goals here: being healthy and housed, being engaged and employed, being prepared and productive, and being connected and resilient. This is a 2017 plan, and we are going to start updating this plan later this year and going into next year. So the intent, what I wanted to show is that there are multiple efforts going on. They are all correlated, they're all connected, and there are opportunities for everybody on this call to get engaged in any of these plans, and we encourage you to do so. So that is the end of my presentation. I'm going to hand it over to Brett, who is the director of WorkSource Fulton, and he's going to talk more specifically about some of the actions that are included in the regional plan and specific steps we're going to move forward to advance the goals of the plan. Brett?
All right, thanks, Rob. So you should be able to see now the regional strategies that we put into place through this plan. So the way the plan is written is a little bit dense as we're responding to specific prompts that the state has asked us for. But you will find within those answers a number of strategies that we have put together to try to achieve these goals. And so again, this is our second round of doing a regional plan. So you'll see that some of these strategies may look familiar. They're either things that we've been doing for a little bit or were in the last regional plan. We found that they were critical for us to continue those as a strategy as we move into this next 4-year plan. You'll also note that we've sort of grouped these into 5 categories that align with that slide that Rob showed on the efforts and the benefit of these strategies towards achieving our goal. These all, again, are in that sort of top right quadrant. So they're the strategies that get us not only the highest benefit for the work, but also take the most effort. Because again, these are going to take really the entire capital S system working together to achieve these goals. It's something that no one board is going to be able to achieve on their own. So again, those sort of broad strategies that you'll see are aligning the service delivery across the 5 boards, implementing a regional sector strategy, sharing our best practices, implementing sort of a regional process for how we handle our customers, and then impacting the workforce system beyond WIO. I want to break these down a little bit for you so you can see more in-depth detail on these. So on this first category of really aligning our service delivery across the 5 boards, these are things that we hope you're already starting to see as we move through some of the work we've done in the last few quarters. That has included standardizing our intake and application process. We have now launched a uniform application process that's also fillable as a PDF, that if you go to any of the 5 boards, you're going to get the same application form. I know that's been a huge change, particularly for our training providers and some of our providers that work very closely with us that help complete those applications. It's now one standard application for all 5 boards. We're looking to coordinate our ETPL contracting and payments. That's our eligible trainer provider list. So basically making sure that we have the same structure for not only what that provider agreement looks like, but also how those payments are paid out, so that it makes it a little bit easier on our training providers and partners of how they're handling the payment across the 5 boards. We're continuing to encourage the co-location of one-stops. We are promoting the standardization of these processes and the intake, and then continuing to research methods for improved customer service. So what you see, these goals that have the strategies that have an asterisk by them, many of these are new to this plan or are currently in progress. So again, you'll see that co-location of one-stops is a carryover from the last plan. But a lot of these are either new strategies or new elements in this. And a lot of these are really the work you're seeing now with our human-centered design work that you may have seen us testing of, particularly with virtual services of launching atlworks.org, where we have a common entrance into the workforce system that gets you to the right board and gets you started on the process again of this uniform application and moving through the system of the webinars that we've been doing for orientation and making sure that everybody is moving through from when you first contact our system all the way until you're in with a training provider. It should be a uniform approach through that service. The next big group of strategies you're going to see is really implementing the sector strategy approach. And this is a lot of work that you will see with our Metro Atlanta Industry Partnerships, or MAPE, that you may be familiar with our team at Atlanta Career Rise really supporting this work. So those strategies are going to include the implementation of a regional CRM system. So this is a customer relations management system, something like Salesforce, that we can, particularly for our business services, help communicate across the region as we work with certain industries, certain sectors, particular businesses, that we can really serve them and those goals and occupations that Rob highlighted in the data section, that we're really targeting that as a region, because we know that our labor shed really covers the whole 10-county metro area, not just our individual boards. So we are really about close to launching that system so that we have unified access across that. We're going to conduct regional business engagement activities. So rather, again, we'll still be doing some on our own, but we're having a more concentrated effort on doing it really as a region for those key sectors. We're going to continue to publish the regional demand occupation list and promote those career pathways as a region instead of 5 separate lists. We are seeking pilot projects. So we've had a few best practices and a few opportunities through the Atlanta Career Rise team to do some pilot projects, like moving LPNs into BSN efforts with our hospitals. So again, that targeted sector of healthcare, we've been looking for opportunities for that. We are continuing to identify emerging sectors. So we are looking to bring on skilled trades and advanced manufacturing to our existing 3 that we have through these sector partnerships of IT, healthcare, and transportation, distribution, and logistics. So we're looking to add those on, and then continuing to collaborate with our business partners for a regional approach to economic development. So this would be our local chambers, the Metro Atlanta Chamber of Commerce and the Opportunity ATL efforts, local rotaries, our local development authorities, making sure that we're plugged in as a workforce system with those groups as we launch economic development efforts. You saw this as well as one of those in that top right category of sharing best practices. So this is not new. This is something that we had in the first regional plan of encouraging our staff to really collaborate with each other. So whether that is our frontline staff of those career advisors that are directly interfacing with job seekers, making sure that they're communicating of what they're seeing, what they're having challenges with as we're problem solving some challenges, particularly in light of the current situation where some of our one-stops are currently closed. They've been doing a great job of talking to each other about how we can reach out to and engage our customers and make sure that they are able to submit their documents and continue to move through the process. We're also really developing a regional communication plan so that the information and the efforts that we are managing are going throughout all levels of our organization. So whether it is our monthly directors meeting that the 5 boards are having, on down again to that frontline level of staff, every member of our organization is in tune with those steps and those goals that we're working on. All right, fourth, again, is all of these efforts that we're making really implementing that regional perspective into the way that we conduct our business. So we are looking, again, a new and exciting opportunity here to explore the possibility of doing regional procurement for some items. So you saw here with this CRM system we're getting to launch, that is a regional procurement that we're doing rather than each of the boards having to manage our own local procurement procedures. And we're hoping that that will make it easier not only for us to move quickly to do something as a region, but also make it a little bit easier on those groups and services that may be looking for those bid opportunities to only have to navigate one procurement process rather than 5. We are looking to align our policies and the guidelines, again, as we move through this human-centered design work. We have been incorporating those policies into our own boards so that it, again, whether it is the eligibility and intake process, whether it is our work-based learning opportunities, we are looking at aligning those policies, again, so they are consistent. And as providers and partners in this work, you don't have to try to navigate 5 different sets of policies. And then as Sonya mentioned at the front end, we have unified our branding efforts of WorkSource Metro Atlanta, along with the WorkSource Georgia tag that we each have to promote the work of our workforces. And then finally, you see here, this is definitely new to this plan. As Rob shared with the Equity at Work initiatives, we are really looking to grow workforce outside of just the WIOA funds. So we are looking at pursuing alternate grants and funding opportunities, again, as a region rather than as 5 separate boards. As Rob mentioned, we are looking at establishing regional performance goals, and these are not the WIOA goals that we are held to, unemployment rate and earnings rate. We're more talking about these equity-based goals of access, the living wage standards, of looking to really make sure that we are providing opportunities and targeting the individuals that need these services to raise them out of poverty and provide them that pathway to economic mobility. We are looking to establish those goals to really work towards, rather than just focusing on the federally mandated goals. And then finally, we are looking to increase grant writing efforts and partnerships to facilitate some of this work. So we are looking for opportunities, again, to bring in that additional funding and additional approaches that might give us some flexibility outside of just the WIOA training platforms. And so those are some of the key strategies that we've added into this new 4-year regional plan. And so I believe, Dana, are we doing the poll now? I believe we have a poll question on this as well of where you all are looking to maybe get plugged in, as I've been sharing these and Rob has been sharing the goals. That we are looking for opportunities for you all as providers and partners to engage in this work and support this work. So I believe we have a poll question on where you may be seeing that you and your organization can get plugged in and help the 5 boards achieve this.
Right, Brett. So I forgot to do my poll, so we're going to we're going to do my poll real quick, which is asking, are these the right goals? And then we're going to go to the poll that Brett had, which is about where you want to engage. So if everybody could go ahead and answer this question, are these the right goals reflecting the right priorities? We'd like to get your feedback on that, and then we will move forward to the next question.
We'll give it a few more seconds.
And I will just mention, oh, good, that is excellent news. Thank you very much. I'm glad that everybody thinks that these are largely the right goals. We are in that 30-day public comment period that Rob Davis mentioned early on. So the way that this works is if you have a comment, you can go to the 2 links that I posted in the chat function earlier. The plan is posted on the MAX website, it's posted on the ARC website, and there's a link to a website, to an email where you can make specific comments about the plan if you would like, and we will respond to that in the plan. I believe it may be posted on some of the other local boards websites as well, but I know for certain that it's on those 2. And then so I'll turn it back over to Dana to ask the next question, which was what Brett was getting to, about which of these areas would you like to get involved in as we move forward? And you're not signing up at this point, but we do want you to think about, as we start having those opportunities to get engaged, which of those areas would you like to be interested in joining? All right, Dana, do you have results for us?
I do.
All right, a nice mix. And implementing beyond WIOA, I think that's fantastic, because that is one of the more difficult areas, I think, and it will take additional effort, but I'm glad to see there's a lot of interest in supporting that. So Dana, we will turn it back over to you. I know we don't have a tremendous amount of time, but we would like to have some Q&A, and there have been some questions in the chat, and I know Dana has some additional questions, so we'll just turn it over to you to facilitate that portion.
Thank you. So I do want to thank Sonya, Rob, and Brett for the presentation today. We do want to open up the floor if you have questions and comments. If you have questions, you can either type them into the chat box or you can unmute yourself to ask a question. We do want this to be interactive. I do have a few questions that I'll prompt the speakers, and then we'll open up the floor. And we do have some questions, as Rob mentioned, that were shared in the chat box. The first question I want to throw out there for the speakers is, we mentioned a lot about the plan and how it's the second of the 4-year plans, the regional plans that you all have developed. Can you highlight a few things that's different from this new plan that were in the previous plan, or some of the innovation that you all incorporated into this new plan to really move the workforce system forward?
So I'll start first on that, so initially the first time we did a regional plan was 4 years ago, and that was the first time it was mandated by WIOA. And quite frankly, when we were doing the plans 4 years ago, you have to do a local plan and a regional plan. And more effort was put into doing the local plans last round, which was 4 years ago. So we really did, one of the main things was we put more effort, particularly to get additional stakeholder input in this regional plan. As Rob Davis mentioned at the very beginning, there were surveys to customers. There were multiple facilitated stakeholder discussions. And so I think that was one of the big differences, is really getting more of our customers and our allied partners and getting their input while we were developing these plans. And then we expanded the regional actions of moving forward. In the last plan, there were a few, but we've actually expanded those this time to get into a few more areas. So I think those are probably the two, from my perspective, two of the biggest changes from the regional plan of 4 years ago to the regional plan of this year.
There's a lot of reference in the plan to COVID-19. Obviously, as you all started this plan, we were right at the beginning of the pandemic and figuring out how to adapt. So there's a lot of mention within the plan about COVID-19 and also the impact of automation and some of the priorities that you all selected for the regional industry strategies and those focus areas. So can you guys talk about how COVID kind of influenced the plan and how it changed the direction that you may have been going in as you were developing this plan, right in the middle of it? And also to think about if there are things that are included in the plan that would help to alleviate some of the things that we had to deal with now that we did not know about prior to COVID-19.
Right. So let me mention one thing, and then Brett, if you could jump in and talk some more specifics. But one of the main things was when we talked about the data. So we started pulling data. Is difficult at times to get it real time. So that a lot of the data that's included was through December of 2019, which was, of course, the economy before COVID hit. But Accenture, again, shout out to Accenture and their team. Thank you for the support. Was able to come in and do additional data analysis that looked at specifically the impact of COVID on the regional economy. So you'll see a discussion about a lot of the data tables through December, and then some specific discussions about the impact of COVID. One of the things that we have seen, though, even though there was a significant impact to our economy, the targeted industries did not really shift because of COVID. So yeah, we had higher unemployment, a lot of unemployment, insurance claims, a lot of people out of work, but the industries themselves, as they're coming back, are not really shifting from those 5 targets. But Brett, go ahead and talk from your perspective as well.
Yeah, I think that there wasn't a whole lot that, at least from my perspective, that was forced to change as a result of COVID. If anything, it reinforced certain components of the plan and accelerated some others. So as Rob is mentioning, it didn't really change too much the key industries or the key occupations, but it reinforced the importance of really targeting these middle skilled jobs and above, and the need to help really focus on economic mobility so that our residents across the metro area are really, we're pointing them towards these more middle skilled living wage jobs. and understanding what skills they may need to be able to enter them. So again, as you look at the trend towards automation and what jobs were impacted, the jobs that have been really resilient are those that have been able to make use of digital skills, or maybe these middle or higher skilled jobs that aren't as susceptible to the automation or towards the requirements of social distancing. So it just reinforced that was where we needed to be focusing, and that we needed to be providing these opportunities for economic mobility. And then on the operations side of things, it really reinforced and accelerated that we needed to really meet customers where they are. So the ability to go through a unified application, the launch of atlworks.org, that we can meet our customers, whether they need to physically get to us and we can adapt our social distancing to be able to serve them in person, or if they're able to do it from home, providing those opportunities to reach out and really engage with those customers, but do it as a unified front, I think has been key. I think we've been running at least orientation sessions as a region. There are at least 2 every week, and we've really had to increase that and put in a few floaters every few weeks of adding possibly a 3rd session every week as a region to bring job seekers into the program and complete their application and their process and get them connected with a career advisor. So it's just accelerated that collaboration and that leveraging of technology to be able to meet our customers wherever they are.
Okay, great. So I'm going to get to some of the questions and comments in the chat box. One question was around the regional, the ARC, and if there's any discussion, or has there been any discussion about splitting some of the southern counties into their own boards, similar to the DeKalb and Cobb. So for Henry and Fayetteville and Clayton, are there any plans to separate those out?
So at this point, there are no plans for that. When you look at the federal law, WIOA, one of the key requirements in there is that to be a separate local workforce development board, the area must have a population of at least 500,000. I believe it's 500,000, or somewhere around there. So most of our individual counties in the state do not reach that population threshold. So that's the first barrier. The second is that the local workforce board boundaries are established by the governor. And they're established by the governor basically through the state workforce office. So any change in those boundaries need to be approached through the state workforce office if the criteria is met for that local area. And then there's a discussion and analysis done at that point. But there are not plans to break out any additional workforce areas within the Metro Atlanta at this time.
There's also a couple other questions around specific populations and whether there's any emphasis within the plan, particularly around veterans and around youth. So are there any specific strategies that are going to be implemented for veterans and or youth within the plan?
Sorry. So youth and veterans, I would not say are specifically in the regional plan, except from the standpoint that they are targeted customers. So the federal law for job seekers states that you have programs that are directly focused on youth ages 14 to 24. I know a lot of areas, like our area, focuses on 16 to 24. And those are held primarily in the local workforce plan. When you get into direct implementation of service delivery, most of that is contained in the local workforce plan. Likewise, with veterans, they are one of the priority customers for local services. And so when you get into the local service delivery, you'll see that there are veterans that are listed in there, particularly, for example, if you have a wait list, veterans are given one of the priority of service categories to move to the front of the line on receiving services. And as we look towards, I will just say, as we look towards additional partnerships to implement services at the local level, we do look to partner more with those that are providing veteran services and connections to veterans.
Okay, great, thank you. We have a few more minutes. There's some specific questions around funding and TCSG and USUL kind of performance goals related to funding, some of the formula funding that comes through Department of Labor. Is there any assurances related to increasing discretionary grants that may fill some of the gaps?
I would love to have some assurances in writing from our friends at TCSG. I will say that they've been very open in the dialogue and have definitely been understanding and supportive of the challenges at the local level. We did just complete a round of performance negotiations, and the state did a very good job of really fighting for us and getting state goals that did represent sort of the economic impact of COVID, and that allowed us as local areas to also have that reflection of our targets. They have also, we are, the way that the workforce funding works is that every year our funding is based on the economic conditions of the year before. So the state had a terrific 2019, #1 state to do business once again. And so as a result, our funding as a state was reduced, which means locally our funding is reduced. The state has made a little bit more of their statewide discretionary funding available to us. It doesn't really make us whole from where we were the last year. So we all are still facing budget cuts for next year, but we anticipate that our 2021 funding, we will see an increase as a result of the economic conditions for this year.
Great, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And this will be our last question. It kind of speaks to the economic mobility conversation, and this is for anybody, Rob Davis or Rob LeBeau or Brett to answer. Just thinking about, the question was, what's kind of driving, what's the lead indicator as to why we are experiencing such low economic mobility? Any thoughts around how to address that?
That is a good question, and it's a difficult question. And I know that one of our audience members, I don't know if he's still on the line, Alex Camardell, is one of the experts in these areas. But our research division has done a lot of work around this, and there have been some national studies that looked at economic mobility. And I forget the gentleman's name, but there's one a person who's really the expert on that, and we rely on the work that he's put out. But it's not a single factor, and that's one of the things. Yep, Jim is Raj Chetty is the expert, and Ashley's also commenting on that as well. But there are several areas around that you have to look at. One is access to education and access to credentials that get us into a living wage. So that's one of the things that we look at. The other is, and it gets to be a difficult subject, but what about institutional racism? What are the policies and practices that have been in place that have not allowed people of color to have the same access to those resources? So there are several different areas around that. It is not an easy answer, and it's not an easy fix, but it is something that we have identified as a priority. And I know several others working in this area have identified this as a priority that we certainly want to move forward and make sure that we're making some good strides for Metro Atlanta. I know Brett or Rob, if you want to add to that.
Yeah, and thank you, Trevor. It's a complex question that I think we're trying to tackle and not just tackle with ourselves. And again, why I think this equity at work effort is so important as a region. We've got, I think, the right partners leading that work for the region. We have really just started dipping our toe into the water of this. And I think some of the data that we've seen is really promising, that we've looked at our own participants that have come through the workforce system. And we've at least seen that we can work to close this gap of income inequality by really supporting these targeted industries. And we've seen in our data of our participants that you can almost erase the inequality in wages when our individuals go through one of these targeted industry clusters and are employed in that high demand cluster It's really amazing to see for all wages in that cluster, those that get the training and are entering into those fields, what happens to that gap compared specifically to white males. So it's encouraging that we at least show data and empirical evidence that there are ways to really approach this and tackle it. But we know that you know, we're a drop in the bucket, as Rob was mentioning, of the really institutional and systemic racism of what has created. If that is what is led to issues with access, you've got transportation challenges, you've got childcare challenges. So it's a very complex issue, and one I think we're really looking forward to diving into with the Equity at Work initiative.
Right. Sorry,
To
go ahead,
add
Rob.
into it also is that one thing that we're working on, reducing the skills gap, that will help to reduce the equity gap.
Right. And just
Great.
look at your chat function. I mentioned that we have excellent people at the ARC research group, and you can see Jim Skinner has already posted a link to Opportunity Insights, which has a lot of background information on this entire subject.
Great. So we are at time, a little over time. So I want to thank everybody for sticking with us, because that was really good information that we got at the end. I want to thank all of our presenters today, Sonya, Rob, and Brett. Thank you to Joy for facilitating on the back end for Max. I do want to mention our next Max Minutes is scheduled for October 2nd, and we're going to look at the latest data insights from Neighborhood Nexus. And we hope that you all will sign up to receive, to participate in that webinar. You will receive a recording for today's session via email, so definitely look out for that. If you want more information, please always feel free to reach out to Max. We would love to hear from you and get you guys engaged. I want to also, again, thank our anchor sponsors for their support, and thank you all for being here today. We'll leave the chat open a little bit, so if anyone has any additional questions, you can feel free to put them in, and we'll try to answer those either via email or we'll send out the presentation. So again, I want to thank everybody for being here this morning, and thank you for your support of Max and Max Minutes.
Thank you.
Thank you.